She didn't scream when the rope tightened. She didn't beg when her legs began to fail. She just kept moving because she knew what came next if she slowed down. Nathan saw it in her eyes before she ever spoke. Not confusion, not weakness. Fear that had been trained, repeated, perfected. Then Briggs froze. His body locked between the woman and the truck, refusing to move, refusing to obey. Nathan reached into the cab and lifted the small black device. That was when she broke. "No, please,"
Stop
Ruth
right
whispered, her voice tearing apart. "When I slow down," he presses it.
Someone who
Nathan
knows
knelt,
what's going on.
lifted the fabric from her ankle, and saw the truth burned into her skin. A shock collar, not on a dog, on a mother. The harbor went silent. In that moment, Nathan understood something terrifyingly clear. This was not neglect. This was not care gone wrong. This was control. Iron Haven Harbor was wrapped in cold morning fog, the kind that clung low to the ground and smelled of salt, rust, and old fuel. The city behind the docks barely existed, just dark shapes and chimneys fading into gray. Nathan Cross moved along the quay with controlled speed. 42, tall, solid, he carried his weight like a man who never wasted energy. His black Navy SEAL uniform was functional, worn soft by years of use, and his movements were precise without being stiff. A black tactical cap shaded his eyes, dark, alert, and habitually scanning. Nathan did not enjoy places like this, but he trusted them. Harbors hid nothing forever. He was here as a security consultant, assessing vulnerabilities in a port that had once served military logistics and now lived in the overlap between civilian neglect and forgotten defense. Nathan kept his thoughts short and sharp. Reflection slowed reaction. He had learned that the hard way. Briggs walked at his side. The German Shepherd was just over 5 years old, large and powerfully built, his black and sable coat thick around the shoulders and neck. His amber eyes were steady, his ears constantly adjusting. Old scars traced faint lines along his hind leg, marks of demanding training, not weakness. Briggs was calm, disciplined, and serious. He was not dramatic. When Briggs reacted, it mattered. They passed idle containers and rusted cranes, frozen mid-reach. The harbor felt paused, not abandoned, like something waiting. Briggs slowed. Nathan noticed instantly. The dog's posture shifted, muscles tightening, breathing shortening. His head lifted slightly, nose testing the air. This wasn't a trained alert. This was instinct. Nathan stopped. No words. He loosened the lead just enough to give Briggs room. The fog pressed closer, dulling sound. A buoy bell rang once in the distance, hollow and slow. Briggs took a step forward, then another. Nathan's focus sharpened. He scanned the area, cracked pavement, corroded bollards, the dark outline of abandoned storage sheds ahead. Nothing moved. That absence set his nerves on edge. "Easy," Nathan murmured. Briggs didn't look back, but the tension in his shoulders eased a fraction. He continued forward, controlled but intent, guiding Nathan toward the eastern edge of the harbor where a sagging chain-link fence leaned under years of neglect. Beyond it, a narrow service corridor cut between two concrete structures. Fog pooled there, thicker, heavier. Briggs stopped hard. His head snapped toward the corridor, ears upright, tail stiff. A low vibration rolled through his chest, restrained but urgent. Nathan followed his line of sight and caught it too. Layers in the air that didn't belong. Human sweat, stress, fear, beneath it, something metallic. Nathan's jaw tightened. This wasn't on his checklist. This wasn't something he could file and forget. He reminded himself, briefly, that he wasn't law enforcement. The reminder didn't stick. He lowered his stance slightly, weight balanced, eyes adjusting to the gray. Old memories pushed at the edges of his mind, moments where hesitation had cost lives. He shut them down. This was now. Briggs angled forward, placing himself half a step ahead of Nathan without pulling on the lead. Protective, deliberate. He wasn't signaling an object. He was signaling a situation. Nathan didn't move yet. He listened. The harbor creaked softly as metal cooled. Water tapped against pylons. The silence felt crowded. Briggs released a short huff, restraint visible in every line of his body. Briggs led Nathan off the main quay and into a narrow concrete passage that ran along the edge of the harbor, the surface slick with moisture and worn smooth by decades of salt and neglect. The fog thinned just enough to reveal shapes ahead, but not enough to soften what waited there. The smell changed first, becoming unmistakably human, layered with sweat and strain, sharp against the cold air. A woman stood on the concrete. She was older, her posture bent slightly forward, as if her body had learned to lean into motion to avoid collapse. A thick length of marine rope was looped tightly around her wrists, the fibers rough and discolored where they pressed into skin. The rope stretched out behind her, pulled taut toward a pickup truck several yards ahead. The truck crawled forward at a slow, deliberate pace, just fast enough to force her to move, just slow enough to disguise cruelty as care. Her name was Ruth Calder. She appeared to be in her late 60s, slight in build, her frame diminished not by frailty alone, but by exhaustion. Wisps of gray hair escaped a loose tie at the back of her head, clinging to her damp temples. She wore a faded sweater and loose slacks, clothes chosen for warmth rather than dignity. Her feet were bare. Each step landed carefully, toes curling slightly as they met the cold concrete. She did not look up. Her eyes remained fixed ahead, focused on the ground as if it were the only thing anchoring her to balance. Briggs stopped abruptly. Without command, without hesitation, he moved forward and planted himself directly between Ruth and the truck. His body was rigid, broad chest squared, legs braced. He did not bark or bare his teeth. He simply refused to move. The rope brushed against his side as it went slack. The truck came to a stop. The engine continued to idle, low and patient. The driver leaned out of the open window. Tyler Calder was in his mid-30s, average height, clean-cut in a way that felt deliberate. His face carried an easy confidence, the kind built in environments where consequences were usually delayed or avoided. He wore a light jacket unsuited for the harbor cold and shoes too clean for the ground he was on. His expression held irritation rather than concern. "Your dog's blocking us," he said, his tone casual, almost amused. In the passenger seat sat Brianna Calder. She was tall, sharp-featured, her dark hair pulled back tightly, giving her an appearance of constant control. She held a smartphone mounted on a stabilizer, angled toward the rear of the truck. The lens was trained on Ruth. Brianna's eyes flicked briefly toward Nathan, assessing him with quick precision before returning to the screen. Her posture suggested someone accustomed to directing narratives rather than questioning them. Nathan stepped forward slowly, stopping beside Briggs. He did not reach for his weapon. His hands remained visible, relaxed, but ready. He took in the scene in fragments, as he had been trained to do, noting details without yet assigning judgment. Ruth's breathing was shallow but steady. Her wrists showed early signs of bruising beneath the rope. The distance between her and the truck was measured, intentional. Nothing about this arrangement was accidental. The rope shifted as Ruth took another step forward, reacting instinctively when the engine hummed slightly louder. Briggs did not move. His stance held firm, forcing the rope to slacken again. "We're almost finished," Tyler said. "She needs to keep moving." Brianna adjusted the angle of the phone minutely. "It's physical therapy," she added, her voice clipped and rehearsed. "Movement prevents stiffness. This is good for her." Ruth flinched at the sound of Brianna's voice. It was small, almost imperceptible, but Nathan saw it. Nathan did not respond immediately. He looked at Ruth, really looked at her, waiting for some sign of acknowledgement. She did not meet his eyes. Her gaze remained fixed on the concrete, her shoulders slightly hunched as if she were bracing for correction. Briggs lowered himself into a sitting position without breaking his line of sight, still blocking the path between Ruth and the truck. His ears were upright, his body coiled with restrained intent. He had chosen his place and would not be moved. Nathan spoke at last, his voice calm, even. "You can stop the vehicle." Tyler's smile tightened. "We are stopped." The engine continued to run. Nathan shifted his attention back to Ruth. "Ma'am," he said gently, "are you okay?" For a moment, she did not answer. Her lips parted slightly, then pressed together again. Her eyes flicked once toward the truck, then back to the ground. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet and controlled, shaped by habit rather than truth. "I'm fine." The words sounded practiced. Briggs leaned forward just enough for his shoulder to touch the rope, not tugging, not pulling, simply present. The contact caused Ruth to pause mid-step, as if she had been given permission to stop. Nathan did not step closer right away. He held his position beside Briggs, feet planted, posture open, the way he had learned to stand in rooms where tension could turn lethal if misread. He did not touch his weapon. He did not raise his voice. The harbor was quiet enough that any sudden move would feel like a provocation. Tyler Calder took that silence as permission. "She's confused," Tyler said, leaning farther out of the truck window. Up close, his face showed the faint irritation of a man used to being delayed, not challenged. His skin was pale, untouched by sun or physical labor, and his hands rested casually on the steering wheel, fingers clean, nails trimmed. "She forgets things. Doctors say it's normal at her age. If we don't keep her moving, she locks up. That's worse for her." Brianna shifted slightly in her seat. She lowered the phone just enough to keep it out of Nathan's direct line of sight, but did not turn it off. She was tall and angular, her posture rigid with control, her expression composed in a way that suggested long practice. Brianna had the look of someone who planned conversations before having them, who rehearsed outcomes and expected compliance. When she spoke, her voice was calm and polished, shaped to sound reasonable even when it wasn't. "We're doing what's best for her," Brianna added. "We've invested a lot in her care. Specialists aren't cheap. Physical therapy costs money. This is our way of managing it." Nathan listened without reacting. He had learned that people revealed more when they believed they were being heard. His eyes moved between Tyler and Brianna, then settled briefly on Ruth. Ruth Calder stood exactly where she had stopped, the rope slack but still looped around her wrists. Her shoulders were tense, lifted slightly, as if she were bracing for a blow that hadn't yet come. She did not look at Nathan. Her gaze hovered just above the concrete, unfocused, avoiding the truck, avoiding Briggs, avoiding the space where answers were expected. Her breathing remained shallow and controlled, each inhale measured, each exhale quiet. Nathan recognized the pattern. He had seen it in civilians who had learned that speaking invited consequences. Silence wasn't passivity. It was strategy. "I didn't ask what you've invested," Nathan said evenly. "I asked if she's okay." Tyler scoffed. "She told you she is." Ruth's fingers twitched against the rope. It was a small movement, almost invisible, but Nathan caught it. Briggs did too. The dog's ears shifted, his body angling slightly toward Ruth without changing position. He remained seated, blocking the path, unmoving. Brianna sighed, the sound practiced. "Look, we appreciate concern, but you're overstepping. You're not law enforcement. You don't have authority here." Nathan nodded once. "You're right." The answer landed wrong. Tyler frowned. Brianna's eyes narrowed just slightly. "I'm not here as a cop," Nathan continued. "I'm here because something doesn't add up." Tyler laughed, sharp and defensive. "You think you know her better than we do?" Nathan didn't answer immediately. He took a step closer to Ruth, slow and deliberate, stopping well outside her reach. He lowered himself slightly, not crouching, just enough to bring his line of sight closer to hers without forcing eye contact. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "you don't have to say anything if you don't want to." Ruth's lips parted. For a moment, it looked like words might come. Then her jaw tightened. She shook her head once, barely perceptible, and looked away. Brianna leaned forward. "She's sensitive," she said. "You're confusing her." The word sensitive hung in the air, thin and dismissive. Nathan straightened and turned back toward the truck. "You said she volunteered." Tyler nodded. "She agreed, didn't you?" Ruth did not respond. Nathan watched Tyler closely now. The impatience in his posture had sharpened into something else, something closer to irritation, edged with unease. People who relied on authority they didn't truly have often reacted badly when it failed to work. "She forgets," Tyler added quickly. "That's part of the condition. She panics if she stops. We keep her moving so she doesn't hurt herself." Nathan glanced at the rope again. Thick marine-grade line. Overkill for assistance, appropriate for control. Brianna crossed her arms, the phone pressed against her forearm. "If this turns into a legal issue, we have counsel," she said. "Good counsel. You don't want to make accusations you can't support." There it was. Money as insulation, lawyers as leverage. Nathan felt a familiar tightening behind his ribs. He pushed it down. This wasn't about winning an argument. It was about reading the truth in front of him. He looked at Ruth again, really looked this time. The bruising beginning to bloom beneath the rope fibers. The way her weight stayed, pitched forward, as if stopping entirely felt dangerous. The way she flinched when Tyler raised his voice, just slightly, like muscle memory. "Ruth," Nathan said, using her name for the first time. "You're not in trouble." Her head lifted a fraction. For the briefest moment, her eyes met his. They were clear, tired, but clear, not confused, not vacant, just afraid. That was all Nathan needed. Briggs shifted, rising smoothly from his seated position and stepping half a pace closer to Ruth, careful not to touch her. His presence was steady, grounding. He did not look at Tyler or Brianna. His attention stayed on Ruth, as if she were the only variable that mattered. Ruth's breathing changed. It deepened just slightly, as if the space around her had widened. Tyler noticed. His voice sharpened. "Hey, don't let your dog near her." Nathan held up a hand, palm outward. "He's not hurting her?" Brianna leaned forward, her composure cracking for the first time. "This is getting ridiculous. We're leaving." She reached for the gear selector. Briggs stepped forward instantly, placing himself squarely between Ruth and the truck again. The rope brushed against his chest and went slack once more. The engine revved, then idled. Nathan did not move to stop them. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood there, present, watching, waiting. Ruth swallowed hard. Her shoulders trembled once, then stilled. She did not speak. Not yet. But she didn't move forward either. The standoff settled into place, fragile and charged. Fog drifted back in around them, blurring edges, muting sound, as if the harbor itself were holding its breath. Nathan shifted his attention downward, away from the truck, away from Tyler's voice and Brianna's rigid posture, and focused on the rope. He moved slowly, deliberately, the way one did when the smallest detail could redraw the meaning of an entire scene. The marine line was thick, industrial grade, its yellow fibers stiffened by salt and age. This wasn't something pulled from a garage shelf or borrowed from a hardware store. It had weight, purpose, history. Nathan knelt just enough to see the knot clearly without touching it. The knot sat tight against Ruth's wrists, compact and clean, its loops layered with practiced precision. It wasn't decorative. It wasn't improvised. It was a working knot, the kind designed to hold under load, to resist panic, to punish resistance. Nathan recognized it immediately. Years earlier, during joint operations near shipping lanes, he had learned to read knots the way others read handwriting. This one was meant for containers, for cargo that shifted and fought gravity. The more tension applied, the more it locked down. The mechanics were unforgiving. Pulling against it only increased pressure. There was no angle from which a trapped hand could slip free. Nathan felt a quiet certainty settle in his chest. Ruth could not have untied this herself. Not by strength, not by patience, not even by accident. He straightened slightly, eyes still on the rope, cataloging the abrasions on her skin. The fibers had begun to bite, leaving angry red impressions that darkened with each minute. Her wrists were held at an awkward angle, not enough to break circulation, but enough to remind her constantly that stopping would hurt. The knot wasn't just restraint. It was instruction. Briggs moved closer. The dog circled Ruth once, slow and careful, nose working the air. His ears angled back briefly, not in submission, but in concentration. The scent profile here was complex, layered with old metal, oil, and concrete dust, but threaded through it all was something sharp and recent. Stress, adrenaline, fear. Briggs's breathing deepened as he processed it, a soft sound that rose and fell with measured control. He paused near Ruth's side, close enough that his shoulder brushed the loose edge of her sweater. The contact was gentle, grounding. Ruth startled at first, a sharp intake of breath, then stilled. Her hands tightened reflexively against the rope, and the knot responded instantly, cinching a fraction tighter. Ruth winced. Briggs reacted immediately, pulling back just enough to remove pressure without retreating. A low sound vibrated through his chest, restrained and protective. He wasn't warning anyone. He was communicating with the situation itself. Nathan watched it all, his mind assembling the pieces with brutal clarity. The knot, the pace, the silence, the way Ruth leaned forward as if stopping were dangerous, the way she flinched at Tyler's voice. This wasn't clumsy caregiving. This was containment. Tyler shifted in the truck, impatience creeping back into his posture. "You done inspecting rope now?" he said. "We really don't have all day." Nathan didn't look up. "Who tied this?" Tyler hesitated, just a beat too long. "It's a standard knot. We live near the docks. People use rope." Brianna leaned forward. "It keeps her steady," she said, "so she doesn't fall." Nathan finally stood, slow and controlled. "No," he said, "it keeps her moving." Silence settled over the concrete passage, heavy and dense. The engine idled. Fog drifted back in along the ground, curling around ankles and tires. Briggs remained close to Ruth now, positioning himself instinctively between her and the rope's line of pull. He angled his body so that if tension returned, it would meet his weight first. It was an untrained behavior, not taught, not commanded. The dog had made a decision. Ruth's breathing hitched, then steadied. She did not look at the knot. She did not look at Tyler or Brianna. Her gaze fixed somewhere past the waterline, unfocused, as if she were waiting for something inevitable. Nathan felt the shift fully now. This was no longer a question of interpretation. This was confinement, enforced not by walls, but by mechanics and fear. He had seen similar strategies before, in places where restraint had to appear voluntary to survive scrutiny. The most effective traps were the ones that punished resistance and rewarded compliance with the illusion of relief. He looked at Ruth again, this time with different eyes. He saw not confusion, but calculation shaped by survival. She knew exactly what the rope would do if she fought it. She knew the cost of testing it. Briggs lowered himself beside her, not touching, just present. His amber eyes flicked briefly toward Nathan, then back to Ruth. He had confirmed what Nathan already knew. The dog wasn't reacting to an object anymore. He was reacting to intent. Nathan straightened fully and turned his attention back to the truck. His voice was even, controlled. This knot doesn't allow self-release. If she falls, it tightens. If she stops, it tightens. If she pulls, it tightens. Tyler's jaw set. You don't know what you're talking about. I do, Nathan replied. Brianna crossed her arms, the phone pressed tight against her forearm now. Forgotten. You're reading into things that aren't there. Nathan shook his head once. I'm reading what's in front of me. The fog thickened again, muting color, softening edges. The harbor felt closer, more enclosed. Briggs shifted his weight, muscles coiled, alert but restrained. Ruth remained still, the first true stillness she had been allowed in a while. Nathan took a slow breath. He didn't reach for the rope. He didn't cut it. He didn't step in front of the truck. He wasn't there yet. But the line had been crossed, and everyone standing on that concrete knew it, whether they admitted it or not. This knot did not forgive mistakes. It did not allow mercy. It was designed to hold until someone else decided otherwise. Briggs broke from his stillness without warning. He moved away from Ruth in a tight arc, nose low, tail rigid, his focus snapping toward the pickup truck as if a thread had been pulled tight inside him. His pace quickened, controlled but urgent, paws striking the concrete with muted precision. Nathan felt it immediately, the shift from assessment to discovery. The dog stopped beside the open driver's side door. Briggs lifted his head, inhaled once, sharply, then again. His ears pinned back, not in fear but concentration. The scent here was different from the rope, different from the concrete and rust. It was newer, synthetic, metallic in a way that didn't belong to engines or tools. His breathing deepened, chest expanding, a low vibration forming again in his throat. Nathan followed. He approached the truck slowly, every sense engaged. The interior was clean, almost aggressively so, the kind of cleanliness that suggested control rather than care. The seats were leather, dark and unscuffed. The dashboard glowed faintly, digital displays humming quietly. The smell inside was wrong, sterile, artificial, layered with the faint ozone tang of electronics. Briggs lowered his head and pushed his nose toward the center console. He froze. The vibration in his chest intensified, controlled but unmistakable. His eyes locked on something half hidden near the cup holders, small enough to be overlooked by anyone not looking for it. Nathan reached in. He did not grab immediately. He studied it first. The device was compact, rectangular, matte black, its surface smooth and worn by repeated handling. 2 buttons sat on the face, one red, one gray, slightly raised, designed to be pressed without looking. A short antenna protruded from one end. There was no brand marking, no label, nothing to soften its purpose. It fit easily in the palm of his hand. Nathan lifted it. Ruth gasped. The sound tore out of her before she could stop it, sharp and broken. Her body reacted before her mind could catch up. She stumbled backward, shoulders curling inward, hands tightening against the rope until the knot bit again. Her breathing fractured into shallow bursts, panic flooding her face. "No," she whispered. "Please, don't." Nathan turned instantly, lowering the device, keeping his movements slow. "Ruth," he said, his voice steady. "Look at me." She didn't. Her eyes were locked on the device, wide and wet, her lips trembling as if words were fighting their way out against years of restraint. Briggs was at her side again in seconds, placing his body between her and the truck, between her and the device. He did not touch her. He simply stood there, solid and present, absorbing the space where fear had rushed in. Ruth's knees buckled slightly. She caught herself shaking. "He presses it," she whispered. The words barely carried over the idle of the engine, but Nathan heard them. "When I slow down," she continued, voice cracking, "when I can't keep up, he presses it." Tyler's head snapped toward her. "What are you talking about?" Ruth flinched at the sound of his voice, shrinking inward again. Nathan felt the last piece lock into place. He turned his attention fully to Ruth now, ignoring Tyler's protests, ignoring Brianna's sharp intake of breath. He moved closer, stopping just within arm's reach, careful not to crowd her. "Where does it hurt?" he asked quietly. Ruth hesitated. Then, slowly, with trembling hands, she nodded toward her right leg. Nathan crouched. He kept his movements deliberate, announcing each one with his body rather than words. He reached toward the hem of her slacks, stopping when her breathing spiked again. Briggs leaned closer, his shoulder brushing her calf, grounding her just enough. "It's okay," Nathan said softly. "I won't rush." Ruth swallowed hard and gave a small nod. Nathan gently lifted the fabric. The device was strapped tightly around her ankle, hidden beneath the loose cloth. A black collar, reinforced nylon, secured snugly against fragile skin. 2 metal contact points pressed into flesh already inflamed and blistered, the skin around them red and raw. The marks were fresh, recent, not accidental. Nathan's jaw clenched. This was not a medical aid. This was not therapy. It was a control mechanism. Briggs let out a low, warning sound, deeper now, vibrating through his chest. His ears flattened slightly, eyes fixed on the device with unmistakable hostility. He understood enough. Pain had a smell. Fear had a smell. This thing carried both. Brianna's voice cut through the moment, sharp and defensive. "It's low voltage. It doesn't hurt her. It's just a reminder." Ruth shook her head violently. Tears spilled freely now, carving lines through the grime on her cheeks. "It burns," she whispered. "It makes my leg jump. I can't stop it." Tyler stepped out of the truck, agitation replacing confidence. He was closer now, his movements quick, erratic. "You're exaggerating. It's motivation. She won't move otherwise." Nathan stood slowly, holding the remote in his hand, the weight of it suddenly obscene. He did not raise his voice. He didn't need to. "This isn't motivation," he said. "This is punishment." The harbor felt smaller suddenly, the concrete corridor tightening around them. Fog drifted back in, muting sound, blurring distance. Briggs remained locked beside Ruth, his body angled protectively, muscles coiled but restrained. Ruth's breathing began to slow, just a little, as the truth settled into the open air. She straightened slightly, not fully upright, but enough to signal something had changed. She had spoken. Once. That mattered. Nathan looked at the remote again, then at the collar, then at Tyler. The sequence was clear now. The rope forced movement. The knot punished resistance. The device ensured compliance when the body failed. Nathan did not touch the collar yet. He did not cut the rope. Not in this moment. But the decision inside him was complete. Briggs shifted closer, pressing his shoulder gently against Ruth's leg. She leaned into him without thinking, the contact anchoring her where fear had unmoored her moments before. The dog had found it, and now there was no space left for denial. Nathan moved the moment the truth had nowhere left to hide. There was no pause for debate, no room for second-guessing. He reached for the rope with deliberate care, keeping his body between Ruth and the truck, between her and any chance of retaliation. From a pocket on his vest, he drew a compact utility blade, the metal catching a thin sliver of gray light. He met Ruth's eyes briefly, just long enough to signal intent rather than ask permission. "This will sting for a second," he said quietly. She nodded once, small and brave. The blade slid under tension and cut clean. The rope parted with a dull snap, the sudden release causing Ruth's arms to drop heavily to her sides. She gasped, more from surprise than pain, knees buckling as the pressure she had been fighting against vanished all at once. Briggs stepped in immediately, pressing his shoulder against her hip, steadying her weight without pushing. His body was warm and solid, a counterbalance to the trembling that ran through her. Nathan knelt again, this time without hesitation, and unclipped the shock collar from her ankle. The strap resisted slightly before giving way, the device falling into his open palm. The skin beneath was raw and blistered, angry red against pale flesh. Nathan felt a familiar burn rise behind his sternum, a controlled anger sharpened by training, by years of knowing exactly where violence began and where it crossed into something else. Ruth sagged forward, breath coming in uneven bursts. Nathan guided her gently to sit on the concrete, keeping her upright, making sure her airway stayed clear. Briggs remained pressed close, his head lowered to her shoulder, his breathing slow and steady, offering rhythm when her own faltered. Behind them, Tyler's voice rose, panicked now, stripped of its earlier bravado. "You can't do that. You can't just—" Nathan stood, shock collar and remote in hand. "It's over," he said, not loudly, but with finality. Brianna stepped out of the truck. Up close, the sharpness of her appearance seemed brittle rather than strong. She was tall, her posture rigid, jaw tight as if clamped shut against loss of control. Her eyes flicked from the severed rope to the device in Nathan's hand, calculation racing to replace shock. "This doesn't have to become a thing," she said quickly. "You're not obligated to stay. We can make this go away." She reached into her bag, fingers moving with practiced ease, and withdrew a slim wallet. A glimpse of cash flashed in the fog-muted light. "You were never here," she added. "We'll take care of her." Quietly. Nathan didn't look at the money. He looked at Ruth, seated on the concrete, shoulders hunched, skin marked by rope and electricity, eyes glassy with exhaustion and relief. He thought of lines drawn long ago in places where walking away had cost lives. "I don't walk away," he said. "Not from this." Brianna's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake." Nathan already had his phone out. He turned away from her and placed the call, voice steady as he requested immediate assistance from the Coast Guard and local law enforcement. He gave coordinates. He gave details. He did not editorialize. When he ended the call, the harbor felt different, smaller, as if the future had narrowed into a single unavoidable path. Briggs shifted slightly, eyes tracking Tyler as the man paced near the truck, hands raking through his hair. The dog did not growl. He didn't need to. His presence alone kept distance where words had failed. Ruth lifted her head slowly. Am I in trouble?" she asked, voice thin. Nathan knelt again, bringing himself level with her. "No," he said. "You're safe." She exhaled, a long, shuddering breath that seemed to empty months from her lungs. Her hands shook as she rested them on her knees, free for the first time in longer than she could remember. The sound of engines approached through the fog, low and purposeful. Moments later, blue and white lights cut through the gray as a Coast Guard patrol vehicle pulled up near the quay, followed closely by a local police cruiser. Doors opened. Boots hit concrete. The Coast Guard officer who approached first was Lieutenant Mark Hensley, early 40s, broad-shouldered, his uniform creased with habit rather than ceremony. His face was weathered by wind and salt, his eyes sharp but measured. He took in the scene quickly, gaze moving from Ruth to the cut rope to the devices in Nathan's hand. "What do we have?" Hensley asked. Nathan handed over the remote and collar without comment. "Unlawful restraint," he said. "Electronic coercion. Victim needs medical attention." A local police sergeant joined them, a woman named Elena Brooks, mid-30s, lean build, hair pulled back tight beneath her cap. Her expression was focused, professional, the kind shaped by years of seeing domestic harm disguised as care. She crouched briefly near Ruth, speaking softly, then stood and signaled to her officers. Brianna's voice cut in sharply. "This is a misunderstanding. We'll cooperate, but there's no need for—" Sergeant Brooks raised a hand, calm but firm. "Ma'am, step back." Brianna hesitated, then complied, her composure thinning. Tyler stood silent now, shoulders slumped, eyes darting. Tyler stood several paces away, flanked by officers who did not touch him but made it clear where the boundary lay. Without the truck and the rope and the performance, he looked diminished. His jacket hung open, his posture slumped, his face pale with a panic that had no place to go. He stared at Ruth as if she were the last familiar object in a room that had suddenly rearranged itself. "Mom," he said, voice breaking before he could steady it. "You don't have to do this." Ruth did not answer. Her eyes were fixed on a dark patch of concrete near her feet, as if the ground were the only thing that would not demand something from her. Tyler took a breath and tried again, softer this time. "We can handle it privately. We always have. You know how this works." The words were gentle, almost affectionate, but Ruth felt the weight behind them. Handle it privately meant disappear. It meant forget. It meant the familiar shrinking of herself so the world around her could remain comfortable. Brianna stood farther back, arms crossed, chin lifted. Her composure had thinned, but not vanished. She watched the officers more than Ruth, measuring, calculating, searching for leverage that might still exist. When she spoke, her tone was carefully neutral. "She's exhausted," Brianna said. "This isn't the time for statements. Let her rest. We'll talk later." Later had always been the word that kept Ruth quiet. Sergeant Elena Brooks stepped closer, her movements slow and deliberate. She crouched slightly, not invading Ruth's space, her expression open and patient. "You don't owe anyone an answer right now," she said. "You can take a minute." Ruth nodded faintly, but the minute stretched, heavy and charged. Inside her chest, something pressed forward, something that had been held down for too long to ignore now. Tyler leaned toward her again, desperation sharpening his voice. "You're my mother," he said. "You're supposed to protect me." The sentence landed exactly where he intended. Ruth felt the old instinct surge, reflexive and painful. She had protected him when he was small, when the world was sharp and he was soft. She had protected him when mistakes were small and forgiveness was easy. She had protected him even when protection had cost her pieces of herself. Her hands tightened together until her knuckles ached. Nathan stood nearby, silent, present. He did not look at Tyler. His attention stayed with Ruth, steady and unhurried. Briggs sat at his side, body angled toward her, ears alert, eyes calm. The dog's presence was constant, a quiet assurance that nothing would force her to move before she was ready. Ruth lifted her head slowly. Her gaze found Tyler, held him. The trembling in her hands did not stop, but her shoulders straightened a fraction. "I was quiet because it kept things calm," she said. Her voice was thin at first, but it carried. "When I stayed quiet, you didn't get angry. When I stayed quiet, you said things were easier." Tyler shook his head quickly. "That's not—" She raised a hand, not to silence him, but to steady herself. "Let me finish." The harbor seemed to lean in. "I learned that if I didn't speak," Ruth continued, "the days went smoother. I didn't get dragged. I didn't get shocked. I didn't get told I was ruining things." Her breath caught, then steadied. She drew herself up, slowly rising to her feet. Brooks moved instinctively to support her, but Ruth waved her off. She needed to stand alone. Silence spread as she straightened, inch by inch, her legs unsteady but determined. The blanket slipped slightly from her shoulders, and she adjusted it without looking down. "I told myself silence was helping," Ruth said, "that it was temporary, that it was the price of keeping the family together." She looked at Tyler again, really looked. "But silence didn't protect me. It protected you." Tyler's face crumpled. "Mom, please, I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," Ruth said quietly. "And that's what made it worse." The admission seemed to drain something from him. He opened his mouth, closed it again, words failing him. Ruth turned then, shifting her gaze from Tyler to the officers, to the open harbor beyond, to a horizon she had not allowed herself to consider. Her hands shook openly now, but she did not hide them. "I stayed quiet because it helped me survive," she said. "But today, if I stay quiet, it will finish me." The words landed with finality. She faced Sergeant Brooks. "I want to tell you what happened," she said. "All of it." Brooks nodded once, her expression firm and respectful. "We're ready when you are." Brianna stepped forward sharply. "You don't understand what you're doing," she said, anger cutting through her control. "This will destroy everything." Ruth looked at her then, eyes clear despite the tears that had begun to gather. "It already did," she replied. Tyler took a step forward, voice breaking completely. "Mom, I'm begging you." Ruth felt the pull one last time, the old gravity of obligation and love tangled together. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. "I love you," she said, "but I won't lie for you. I won't disappear for you, and I won't be quiet so you can keep hurting me." She turned away from him, the motion small, but absolute. Briggs rose smoothly and moved to her side. She rested her hand against his shoulder, drawing strength from the solid warmth beneath her palm. The dog stood still, unwavering, as if he understood exactly what this moment cost. Officers moved then, gently but decisively. Tyler was guided back, his protests fading into stunned silence. Brianna's jaw tightened as she was separated as well, her composure finally cracking under the weight of consequence. Ruth remained standing, watching it happen. Her legs trembled, but she did not sit. She had spent too long being pulled forward by fear. Now she stood by choice. Nathan stepped closer, just enough to speak without being heard by others. "You did the right thing," he said quietly. Ruth nodded, tears slipping free at last. They were not tears of collapse, but release. "I know," she said, and for the first time she believed it. The harbor lights reflected steadily off the water, no longer harsh, no longer blinding. Ruth drew a slow breath and let it out, feeling the ground hold beneath her feet. Morning arrived quietly over Ironhaven, pale light spilling across the harbor as if the night had decided to loosen its grip all at once. The water lay calm, steel blue and steady, gulls cutting low arcs through the air. The docks looked ordinary again. That alone felt like a victory. Months had done their work. Tyler and Brianna no longer stood behind lawyers or excuses. Courtrooms stripped things down. Evidence spoke. The rope, the knot, the device, the silence that had finally broken. The verdict came without drama, heavy and final. Convictions for elder abuse and unlawful confinement. Sentences measured in years. The kind of accountability that did not erase harm, but drew a clear line around it. Ruth watched none of it in person. She had chosen the sea instead. The recovery center sat on a bluff overlooking the coast, a low white building with wide windows and the constant sound of waves moving with purpose. Ruth woke early there. She liked mornings now. She liked choosing when to stand, when to sit, when to walk. Her hair was shorter, practical, silver catching the light. The tremor in her hands came and went, but it no longer controlled her. She learned the routines of healing the way she had once learned silence, patiently, one day at a time. She walked the paths along the water with other residents, sometimes alone, sometimes not. She spoke when she wanted to. She rested when she needed. At night, she slept without listening for engines. Briggs had his own morning rituals. Recognition came quietly, without ceremony. Tests completed, standards met, evaluations signed. He was officially cleared, K-9 qualified, his instincts documented, his reliability confirmed. The paperwork did not explain what he had done, but it did enough. He wore the new tag without fuss, tail thumping once, as if to say that titles changed nothing. Nathan watched him with something like pride, something like relief. The truck was already packed when the sun finally cleared the horizon. Nathan stood at the edge of the quay one last time, hands resting on the railing, breathing in salt and cold air. Ironhaven was waking behind him, forklifts starting up, radios crackling, life continuing the way it always did. He hadn't planned on staying this long. He rarely did. But some places asked for more, and this one had asked just enough. Briggs sat beside him, alert but relaxed, eyes tracking the light as it spread across the water. Nathan scratched behind the dog's ears, a familiar motion, grounding. He thought of all the times he had walked away before, the moments he had justified as not his mission, not his authority, not his place. He thought of the thin line between intervention and avoidance, and how easy it was to tell yourself you were doing the right thing by doing nothing. This time, he hadn't. The engine started with a low rumble. Nathan took one last look at the harbor, then turned the truck toward the road. As they pulled away, dawn fully claimed Ironhaven, the light clean and unmistakable. Nathan drove on with the quiet certainty that comes when a line has been held. In our own lives, many of us walk our own quiet harbors. We carry pain that others cannot see. We stay silent because it feels safer than speaking. This story is a reminder that silence may help us survive for a season, but truth is what allows us to heal. When you feel alone, remember that God sees you, even when no one else does, and He is already preparing a way forward. Let this story be a call to action. If you see someone hurting, do not look away. If you feel called to step in, trust that God may be working through you. And if you are the one in pain, know that asking for help is not weakness. It is faith in motion. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment below and tell us where you are watching from. If you believe that God still performs miracles through ordinary people and faithful hearts, type Amen in the comments as a prayer not only for Ruth, but for yourself and everyone reading. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of faith, courage, and redemption. May God watch over you, protect you, and give you the strength to speak, to act, and to heal. Amen.